Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank both sides of the aisle for their heart and passion on this particular issue, because it does affect every community, and yet at the same time it is critically important that we recognize that as important as it may be to have a new director of this agency slash subset of the executive branch, it is far more critical that we actually start doing something about it, because this did not start with this administration. We've had this issue for a long time, and I know the gentleman from Massachusetts would agree with that. I do agree that it should be all hands on deck, and I think the problem that you're hearing is a frustration of the fact that we have a drug that is being used, and there's so many deaths each and every day, as Ms. Goodwin, as you pointed out, that we've got to deal with it. Now, the other thing is, and I would encourage, the ranking member of this committee has been very vocal in this area, and I appreciate his leadership. It also goes into other areas, like FDA. We've got to find other alternatives for pain management that are, quite frankly, in the hopper waiting to be approved. And so we need to work in a bipartisan way on areas that perhaps have a less addictive nature. This was supposed to be the wonder drug, and it has really taken over in a critical area. Ms. Goodwin, I want to come to you, because you talked about the coordination and where we are, and that it's critical that we have a coordination, and yet I think what I understand is so whether it's the DEA coordinating with the Coast Guard, coordinating with other areas on domestic illegal synthetic opioids, GAO found that only 1 of 5 strategies it reviewed actually included a results-oriented matrix or measurement. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we looked at the 5 strategies that are out there, and the only one that had a performance-related metric was the HARP program.
Okay, so if we have 5 programs and only 1 of them has a measurement, how do we know when we're succeeding or making progress? Is it all just...
Well, that's something we recommended. In our recommendation we submitted to ONDCP, we talked about the need for them to come together and kind of pull all of those strategies together, have a conversation, and help each of those strategies develop metrics. Because you can't really get to the heart of the problem or begin to address the problem if you don't have evidence-based information.
So if it's evidence-based, I think we will find Democrats and Republicans alike that will want to look and say, are we making progress here? And what you're saying is that the only progress that we see currently is really whether deaths go down from overdose? I mean, how do we measure whether we're making progress with any policy, no matter how great it is? What would be your recommendation?
We didn't talk through, or we don't put out there as GAO like what each of the entities are supposed to do. We asked that ONDCP develop start a review to develop a strategy that crosses all of the different stakeholders, and working very closely with the public health officials, law enforcement, and the other stakeholders. We think that's a way to come to a strategy and begin to think about.
Yeah, let me interrupt, because I've only got 1 minute left, but and I appreciate your answer, but I guess my question is, if you've identified it as a concern, you obviously have areas that you believe need to be measured. Do you not?
Yes.
So have you made those recommendations in the areas that need to be measured? Because you just said you didn't make a recommendation, but when you're doing the analysis, you have to run across what your areas of concern are.
Yeah, one of the things we look for when we're doing our analysis, when we looked at HARP, we noticed that they were actually, collecting data, paying attention to the information, and reporting out. The other 4 strategies we looked at were just measuring whether someone showed up to a meeting or participated in an activity. We didn't feel like that went a long way, went far enough to actually getting at a conversation about what's the extent of the problem, what's the nature of the problem, and how can you best develop strategies around that. So when GAO goes in to look at something, the first thing we want to know is where are the data. And we weren't finding the type of data we thought would be useful for this conversation.
So, Mr. Chairman, may I offer this, is in a bipartisan fashion, I know you have made this a priority for the reauthorization and really moving forward. Mr. Chairman, I know where your heart is. I know where the heart of the ranking member is on this particular issue. And if we only reauthorize to not actually have a plan that implements with a measurable tool like Ms. Goodwin did, we will have failed. And so I'm committed to work in a bipartisan fashion with both of you on the leadership on this particular issue. I thank you.
Thank the gentleman from North Carolina. The gentlelady from Illinois is recognized.